Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are and when you are listening to this. Let's get right into it. Hi, Amber E. Glad you could join us. And yeah, that was the intro music was a piece that I knocked together today, especially for this live. I'm not using the StreamYard provided bits of sound, bits of music. I want to make my own for my own lives, and I think that that's a good thing. So I just knocked it together, and it's especially for this live. I thought, something of kind of a mix of kind of quiet defiance, and this is certainly what this live is going to be about. It's obviously going through the case of Lucy Letby and why I think that this is the greatest miscarriage of justice ever done against a single woman in UK legal history. So a bit of background about who Lucy Letby is and was. Lucy Letby was born on the 4th of January in England, in Hereford, which is in the Midlands. It's a very nice part of England, very low crime, lots of nice countryside nearby. Just really nice place to grow up and live. And she was the only child of parents John and Susan. And her father was a retail salesman and her mother an accountant's clerk. And the family was very well liked in the area, and she was adored by both of her parents. She grew up in a quiet three-bedroom home near the River Were, sorry, in Hereford, and she attended St James's Church of England primary school. Primary school for the Americans is like elementary school, so yeah, it was basically her elementary school was St James's in Hereford, and then she went to Ayleston High, also in Hereford, or just outside Hereford. Attended Hereford sixth form, and for Americans and North Americans and people not from the UK, sixth form is basically optional. So in the UK, you leave high school, you leave high school at 16. But you have the option to do 2 more years in education before university and study things called A levels. And then, based on your A levels, not SATs, that determines which university you go to if you want to go to university. I myself didn't go to sixth form and didn't go to university either. I just went straight to work, you know what I mean? Because that's the type of person I am. I'm like right to it, Second you can get me out of the classroom, I'm right out of there. But not Lucy. Lucy stuck with it. She did a sixth form and studied A levels, which related to nursing studies. And A levels kind of inform what you do at university. And then she got to university. She was the first member of her family to go to university. She studied at Chester University, which is very close to where I grew up. I grew up not far from Chester, so I'm very familiar with the area of where she went to university and then subsequently worked and lived. She'd always wanted to be a neonatal nurse, so like a nurse that dealt specifically with babies since she was a kid. So the fact that she studied it in sixth form and then went on to university to do it didn't shock anyone, in terms of her friends or her family. Like they all kind of knew that Lucy was destined to be a nurse. And she attended Chester, like I said, and she graduated in September 2011. And she was in an assessment, though, when she was on her placements before she kind of graduated. It was said by one of the assessors that she could be cold and lack empathy. But the thing is that, and this will come into play later, like when we talk about what she was accused of, wrongfully, I feel. But, you know, people deal with things differently, you know what I mean? People show emotions differently. I know nursing is a job where you've really got it, or like the healthcare industry. No, I shouldn't say industry, that's what it is in America. The healthcare service sector, should I say. Um, it requires empathy. It requires people to be empathetic. But nurses are human beings as well, and nurses have bad days, and nurses have days where they're dealing with their own shit, and it can be hard to be sympathetic with others. So I think it is kind of cruel for that to be held over her. You know what I mean? Because nurses are human beings. Medical professionals are human beings too. And have good days and bad days. Oh, hi Val, glad you could make it. I'm so glad you're here, and Nasty Meal as well. So glad you're here, Val, and Nasty Meal and everyone. Great, great, and glad you could make it. So yeah, we're talking about Lucy Letby, and as I said earlier, I think, and I said to you earlier, Val, I think she is the UK's Karen Reid. You know, but the difference between her and Karen Reid is Lucy Letby's currently in like a high security women's prison, probably the most like hardcore prison you could be sent to in England if you're a woman. Like women in there are not in there for like not paying parking tickets or a little pub brawl, a little bar fight or anything like that. No, the women in there are serious criminals, killers, serious drug baronesses would be the term, and gangsters. You know what I mean? And terrorists as well. She's in there with some serious heavy hitters. And that's the reality of it. And I think she's there wrongfully, and she's there doing 15 life sentences. And I think it's the greatest miscarriage of justice in UK legal history that this has happened to her. And we're going to get into exactly how I think she was set up, and who it was and why. And we're going to do this all in detail. So join us as we get into it. She worked on her placements before she settled down at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She had worked at Liverpool Women's Hospital as well, which made the news a few years ago because a guy who worked there actually tried to do a suicide bombing at the actual women's hospital, and was only stopped by a heroic taxi driver who managed to he basically caught on to what he was going to do and stop him, physically restrain him and lock him in the car, and so that he couldn't run into the hospital and do a massacre. So yeah, Liverpool Women's Hospital has seen quite a history. So Lucy spent some time there as well as settling down at the Countess of Chester Hospital, which is where all the crimes she was committed of were alleged to have taken place. When I don't think she committed any crime. And her friends viewed her as a nurturing Mary Poppins figure, which is, it's at odds with this kind of perception that's been put out there of her being, cold and lacking empathy. And there's other things that we'll get into that will put oh, she's just a cold, unempathic person. No, her friends and her family always saw that side of her, and also patients and relatives of patients did see that side of her. You know what I mean? And as I said earlier, nurses, human beings as well. Nurses go through ups and downs emotionally, just like we do. And sometimes I am not the most empathetic person because I'm going through something in my head. We all get like that, so we can't condemn some people based on that and have this fixed perception. Yeah, Val, it's crazy. It's so terrifying that can happen. It nearly happened to Karen. It has happened to Lucy. I'll say it again. She is the UK's Karen Reid, and many podcasts. I think it's called the Red Handed Podcast, something like that. I'll link it. They're two women who do a podcast in the UK. They're like the biggest true crime podcast in the UK. They've won a lot of awards. I really like those two, and I'll send you them, Val, and everyone on the community page. I think you'd really enjoy them. And they've talked about the fact that Lucy Letby is probably not guilty in their opinion, and I'd love to link some of their stuff because they really do not just an hour and a half max like I'm gonna do. They do a real intensive 4 hours, multiple parts each 4 hours. So yeah, if you really want to get into every nitty gritty detail, I'll link them to you. Yeah, nice. I'll send you a link to them over Insta, or I'll just put it on my community page, either or, because I'll do both so that everyone can check them out, and anyone who's listening in the replay, because it's good for anyone, especially Americans and people not from the UK, who want to know about cases that are UK specific, because they do all cases from all over the globe, but they do specialize a lot on UK based cases, and they're really cool. Like, they're not always serious, they always add levity to it as well, whilst maintaining that respect for the victims, which is, you know, perfect. And that's exactly what we try to do here, ATS, and the same as you, Val. Like, that's our approach. You know, we it's like I've said this before, like nurses and police officers and soldiers and like people who I've spoken to in those professions, like they always say like, we have such grim jobs, like it's so we see some dark things a lot of the time, so we have to have a kind of a dark sense of humor, a detached sense of humor to cope with it, because humor is a coping mechanism. People deal with trauma, like I deal with trauma by using humor. You know, I find it to be an effective way of doing it, confronting it, but also using humor to make it easier to handle. You know what I mean? And that's just a natural reaction. You know, what are you going to do? Let yourself be consumed by it, or are you going to try and, you know, add some levity to, you know, when you're dealing with, you know, nasty cases or hard subjects, it's always necessary. You know. Uh, Hi, Diva Girl. Glad you could make it. It was nice chatting with you, Val, and everyone who was in ATS's live last night, talking about Mackenzie's case, which I would like to cover on this channel as well at some point. But so many people are covering it and doing such a great job. Melly and Amber. I may just do one live about it. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't want to. I know we say it's everyone's case and everything like that, but they're just doing such great a job. I don't want to cramp the style. You know what I mean? So, but glad you're all here. Yeah, and I'm glad you had fun, Val. Yeah, it was a great live. You know, you really have some great insights on that case and all the cases that you do research on, and even the ones that you go in blindly. You've got really good true crime instincts. You know what I mean? And I'm always honoured and really privileged and happy that you make it here, and everybody else. You know what I mean? Like, there's some real good assessments from the audience every time I do a live, and I really love the audience input. And in Lucy's private life, or life away from work, should I say, uh, I would love if you did a live. And oh, thanks for the encouragement, Val. Yeah, I think I will do then. And you know, maybe if you're able to get your computer sorted out, you could come up. You know, and if you're feeling okay to do it, you know what I mean, because I know we know uh what you go through and everything, and I don't want to put like you on the spot or put any pressure on, but yeah, you're a whiz at true crime, and especially on the you know, the Mackenzie case, and I would like be honored to have you make a brief you know, departure from your hiatus from panels and graces with your presence, but you know, absolutely no pressure. That's great. That's great. But yeah, no pressure if something comes up. By the way, you're not gonna. It's not gonna let me down. It's not gonna let me down at all. So absolutely no pressure. If you don't feel up to it when you're doing it for whatever reason, like, that isn't gonna piss me off. I'm not. I'm not like Higgins, where I'm gonna just send you a bunch of question marks and cry like a little child to my mommy. I can handle it. But yeah, like in Lucy's life away from work, because I always like to give a picture of who our subjects are, aside from, you know, the crimes or the crimes that's been alleged to them or the cases that we're covering. I like to talk about human beings. Glad you like that. I like to talk about human beings. You know what I mean? Because everybody is a human being. Like, the most evil people in the world, like who we've talked about on here, like Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. At one point, they were just little babies. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't evil then. I don't believe. I don't believe people are born evil. I think people are victims of mental illness and of trauma, unresolved trauma, and untreated mental health problems. You know, I believe that people can be evil, but I don't believe people are born it. You know what I mean? They find it. I believe. So that's why I like to give a big picture as well, and also to make it less, like I've said before, less like, Oh, it's just another topic. You know what I mean? I take all this seriously. I know this is someone's life. You know, Lucy Letby, in my view, is like innocent and has been framed and is doing 15 life sentences in like the worst of the worst prison imaginable you could be sent to. Not even as a woman, like anyone. You know, that the worse she's at, it ain't fun at all. You know. So and she's in her cell like 23 hours a day, so she only gets out for like 1 hour of wash and exercise. So she's really going through it. So this isn't just another topic for me to cover. This is certainly something I may, like I've teased earlier, I'm getting pretty serious about it. I may become the turtle boy Aidan Kearney of Lucy Letby's case. And when I am back in the UK, and when I go back to visit or whatever to see family, you know, whatever, work obligations, whatever, commitments, you know, depending on why I'm there, like regardless of why I'm there, actually, I'm gonna try and organize something like a rally or like a talk about like the fact that like Lucy Letby has, in my view, been set up, and go through why I think this, and you know, educate people on it, you know, because it is a case that really swept the nation. You know, people were really outraged, rightfully so, you know, because it was presented to us that she was this murderer of babies, you know what I mean? So like, of course people are going to be outraged and emotional, but then when you actually look into the facts, none of the facts suggest that, you know what I mean? It's terrifying, the fact that somebody can be convicted of such serious charges on such flimsy or lack of evidence. You know, in a country like the UK, it's terrifying. But before I, you know, sidetrack again, back to what I was trying to say. In her life away from work, she liked to practice salsa dancing a lot. She loved going to the gym, taking care of her two cats, you know, and she's a cat person. So I've got that in common with her, you know, and a lot of us who watch this channel are cat people. I'm not just a cat person, I'm an animal person. I love dogs as well. You know, I love all animals. There's not an animal I don't like. I like rats, you know what I mean? I like alligators. I like the most out there animals you can imagine. They're all very valuable and important in my view. Sacred, you know. And but enough about me. And she enjoyed vacationing with her friends as well. She had a close circle of friends that she knew from high school and university and from work, you know. So she had a really tight social circle. She wasn't a loner. And you know, after a period of investigations internally in the hospital, where Lucy was initially accused of wrongdoing and then found to have not been at fault and was defended by the hospital executives and administrators. Uh, After that period, and she felt, you know, on allegations of events from 2015 to 16, where there were multiple baby deaths on the unit. And they said it was always when she was working, but that just simply isn't true. Some of them were when she was working, others weren't, you know. So that perception that was put out there wrongfully by the prosecution and by the media, that whenever these mysterious deaths happened, she was working, absolute bullshit. Absolute bullshit. It wasn't the case. Absolutely not true. And she was actually, you know, after being defended by the, you know, the hospital administrators, the executives, the figures at the top, I believe that they threw her under the bus. There were suspicions about these deaths. She, you know, was the most prominent nurse on the unit, so suspicion fell onto her. She wasn't at fault. They found that. And then the executives, who I feel knew that there was systemic problems at the Countess of Chester Hospital, that they were the ones who were negligible. They were the ones at fault because they allowed, I will get into why, but they allowed for bacteria to be around the ward that I believe contributed to a lot of these deaths. Absolutely not Lucy Letby. They knew about that, and I think they used Lucy Letby as a scapegoat, as a frame job, because after they defended her and she'd been cleared, they were like, right, fuck, these deaths are mysterious. If it isn't her, they're going to deduce that it's because of this bacteria. It's because of our incompetence. It's because we didn't do our jobs. We're the ones who are guilty of manslaughter. We're the ones who are guilty of gross negligency. And we've tried to, and we're going to cover it up by pinning it on her because we're going to be respected more because we're the executives. She's just a fucking nurse. That's the perception. That's why, and that's evil. And that's evil. And that's exactly what I think was done to her. So after being defended by these executives, they, I feel, decided to turn tails and then like frame her completely for all this and say that they were murders and that they were premeditated when no, there was infant deaths, and these infants didn't die from murder. They died from bacteria being in the wards and the poor condition of the ward, which wasn't Lucy Letby's responsibility. It was the responsibility of the executives, of the head of the hospital, to make sure bacteria wasn't spreading in the ward, to make sure that these checks and balances were followed. Lucy Letby's duty was to do what she was doing with the babies and look after their care, and that's what she did. I don't think that there was any negligence or any maltreatment on Lucy's part. The conditions of where she was, the bacteria, I think, contributed to most of these babies' deaths. And I think that there was negligence from staff above her, and they knew that, and negligence in procedures of the department, and it wasn't Lucy's fault if she wasn't trained something a certain way or told to do something a certain way by her superiors. You know what I mean? Like, that isn't her fault. Didn't she we were going to get to that, but I'm glad you mentioned it. Didn't she keep a journal where she essentially admitted to it? Well, she said, I'm evil. uh, she basically said, I'll get the quote. She said, oh yeah, I'm evil. I did this. When, you could see that as an admission of guilt. Or conversely, which is what I argue and I believe, and her defense argued, but I believe this to be true. Like, a lot of medical professionals or police officers or soldiers, like those types of professions, or teachers, you know what I mean? If something goes wrong, like, I mean, you know what I mean? If like a child dies on your watch, even if you've not physically done them in, you feel responsible. You feel, and a lot of nurses and doctors feel this. You know what I mean? When a patient dies and it isn't their fault, they blame themselves regardless. And I think that is it's unfortunate that she wrote that, but I think that was her feeling, like she could have done more. When, like, the reality, the reason a lot of these babies died was because of the bacterial infections, because there was bacteria rife on the ward, and that was the responsibility of the leaders of the hospital, the executives, to sort out, which they didn't. And they keep dying. Lucy, didn't, I believe, try and to do them any harm, but regardless, she's like, oh my god, that this is all on my watch, this is my department, they're all dying, oh my god, I'm so terrible. And she sent letters of condolences and teddies and everything to the families, because she did feel like she'd let them down, like she didn't do her job well enough, and that wasn't the case. You know what I mean? I think she was gaslit as well to feel that way by people above her, because they knew why the babies were actually dying. You know what I mean? And that's the yeah, it's the sort of, it's like, as soon as you hear it like that and you know what she's been charged with, I was like, fucking hell, like, that's the smoking gun. But then when you think about it from that perspective, like like a teacher's like loses a kid on a field trip, like, oh my god, you know what I mean? Or like a kid in a high school, takes their own life tragically. Teachers often think, oh my god, why didn't I do more? Why didn't I reach out to this kid? Why didn't I feel like they could speak? Why didn't I let them feel like they could speak to me about their problems? I feel like I'm evil, you know what I mean? I did this basically by not doing enough. You know what I mean? And like when you think of it like that, it's like, you know what I mean? It does make a little bit more sense. And then eventually, despite them batting for her originally when they'd already thrown her under the bus, she was arrested in July in 2018. And officers raided her Cheshire home at 6 a.m. and her mother on the body cam, and I'll share the body cam as well because they have that. And yeah, her mother can be heard crying in distress in the background, and Lucy just looks absolutely like shocked beyond belief, like she doesn't understand what's going on. And she was bailed twice and arrested a third time and final time in November 2020, where she was officially charged with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder and of babies under her care. And part of the quote unquote evidence was like what we were saying about the journal entry, but we already covered how that isn't necessarily an admission of guilt. It could be an admission of feeling like you're incompetent, like you could have done more, like you'd let them down. You know what I mean? She's currently serving, her whole life sentences, 15 whole life sentences at HMP Low Newton, which is near Durham. And in 2026, in January, the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, so the body that decides whether people are charged with crimes or not in the UK, they said that no further charges would be pursued because they were trying to talk about, deaths of infants when she was at Liverpool Women's as well. But like I said, those deaths themselves were found to have not happened when she was on duty. You know what I mean? So it's absolutely rubbish. They couldn't, even if they had, it doesn't mean she was responsible. But the fact is, the ones that were found at Liverpool Women's, like she was never on duty when they happened. So they can't even be linked to her. She couldn't be charged for them. She couldn't have possibly have done them. And separate allegedly to the Lucy Letby investigation, but this is, in my view, very much central and linked to the Lucy Letby case. Thanks so much for turning up, Amber, and asking everyone to hit the like. I'm really glad you could make it. Yeah, and I was talking earlier about your live last night. It was so good about Mackenzie, and and we were saying earlier in the comments, I'd like to do another live with you about the missing scientists. But like we said, YouTube wasn't fond of that conversation in the algorithm, so maybe it's one for Rumble or somewhere else. Because it's I'm glad that neither of us and a lot of the commenters and a lot of people in general are willing to just forget about it all and and just move on. You know what I mean? Same with the Epstein files. No, we're going to be a thorn in the side of these corrupt people, and we're going to expose corruption wherever it may be and continue to do it, and whoever may be doing it. And in terms of true crime and investigating, when you're doing something that you feel can actually really make a difference, it makes it that much more fulfilling. You know what I mean? And especially in the case where you feel like there's severe government corruption, it makes you want to go harder, even harder. And hi, just Shamrock, glad you could make it. And so like a case where there's any kind of government corruption, you try and I personally I take it a lot more seriously than any others. And back to Lucy Letby, but yeah. Not officially separate to the Lucy Letby case, but I think completely linked to it. Three senior hospital bosses at Cheshire, like the people who I was saying originally went to bat for her earlier, but then threw her under the bus. Yeah, these people, these three bosses at the Countess of Chester Hospital, were arrested this year on charges of gross negligence, manslaughter, perverting the course of justice, and corruption in an important medical position. Many other charges, and those are like institutional kind of medical board charges, but these are criminal charges as well, as I've outlined. Obviously, manslaughter, perverting the course of justice. These can get you life sentences. You know what I mean? Combined. If you're convicted of both, and these are the people I feel that were responsible for the deaths on the wards because of the spread of bacteria and also allowing incompetence and negligence in terms of not providing adequate training to staff, not following procedures or implementing the following of procedures, rigid procedures. And it wasn't Lucy Letby's job to implement all of these, it was the bosses. They are responsible. And I believe that once these people are convicted, hopefully, that as well as um, Lucy's case is also up for review currently, and that's what we're getting on. But hopefully the combination of these two factors will fully vindicate Lucy Letby, not just legally but in the public's eyes. I hope she can get out, but I don't want her to have to live in fear or have to hide her identity. I want her to be able to live her life and be open and public, you know what I mean, and go back to nursing. You know what I mean? What she loves doing. You know what I mean? I think she has every right to go back to that. I don't think she did anything wrong, and I think she would be entitled to sue these three hospital bosses who I believe framed her for murder, for mass murder, when to distract the fact that they themselves were guilty of manslaughter and mass incompetence and perverting the course of justice. It's absolutely crazy that she's still locked up. Absolutely crazy. But as I hinted at earlier, um, I don't. Her case is up for review, and from the and she has the backing of a panel of independent medical experts. This includes neonatal experts, so experts in baby care and baby nursing, as well as independent medical experts in general, are backing her, arguing that all of the medical evidence against her is shoddy at best and completely farcical at worst. So these are professionals actively going against every piece that at her trial, the prosecution's medical expert, who was himself under investigation at that time for harming patients when he was testifying against Lucy Letby. So my view is that they found him and he thought, oh, right, by doing this, shaking the hands of these senior people in the medical board, like these three executives, maybe the medical commission will look more favorably upon me. So that could suggest why this quote unquote professional was telling outright, lies and suggestions and really far fetched suggestions at best. And the fact that he argued that the blood levels of the deceased children, of the deceased babies, showed high levels of insulin, suggesting deliberate poisoning. However, the experts, the independent experts, the panel of independent experts who back Lucy and who have been employed by her new legal team, I think her lawyers at the first trial really let her down. But I think she did. She employed them. She didn't have like big lawyers because I think obviously she knew she was innocent. She didn't think it would be that difficult. But the weight of the conspiracy against her was huge, and she needed a big lawyer to help her. And thankfully, she's got them now. But like I was saying, that the blood of the deceased babies showed high levels of insulin, suggesting that Lucy deliberately poisoned them. But experts argue that this is misleading, and they argue that standard lab tests for insulin can give false positive readings, and also it can mistake other substances or in the body for insulin. And so that arguing this this isn't proof at all that Lucy poisoned any of the babies. In fact, it isn't even proof that the babies died of insulin poisoning. So that is completely disputable. And several babies suffered sudden collapses and skin discoloration, and prosecution said that Lucy injected them with embryo and that this caused this, and then they died from this. But however, experts have argued that skin discoloration is not definitive proof of an embolism, suggesting that these reactions may be due to natural infections, like what I was mentioning earlier about the bacteria, the specific bacteria that was found on the neonatal ward where these babies died is called pseudomonas or pseudomonas. I may have butchered that, but that's how I wrote it down. Bacteria that was present in the ward at the time, and that's what the experts suggest the discoloration in the baby's faces was, and the reason for their sudden collapses and death because of this, because of natural infections that were present on the ward that these high ups knew about, but Lucy Letby didn't know about, that none of the nurses knew about. And expert prosecution witness, like I said, was himself under investigation for harming patients when he was saying all this. So his credibility really is under question. Prosecution pathologist testified that the baby's fatal liver injuries were as a result of blunt force trauma. Some babies had fatal liver injuries, and then he suggested that this was a result of blunt force trauma by Lucy. However, the independent panel of experts have said that the location of the injuries and the condition of the liver tissue don't align with assault. They simply don't. And that this is just not true, you know, and all the main bulk of this supposed key evidence against her, the medical evidence, all they've got is all easily disputable. I feel so terrible that she didn't have a good defense team like Karen Reid had, that she lacked the means to have a good defense team in her first trial, because oh my god, like I'm confident that even I, as her lawyer, and I'm not a qualified lawyer by any means, but I think even I, representing her, would have been able to do a better job than they did. I seriously don't think that they did a good enough job representing Lucy at all, because this all speaks for itself. Every supposed smoking gun in this case is easily debunked and heavily disputed. So to put a woman, a nurse away for for 15 life sentences in a high security prison in Durham, locked up 23 hours a day on supposed evidence that can be debunked and disputed heavily, is the definition of a miscarriage of justice. There's nowhere near they haven't met the burden of proof. I mean, if I was even a judge, like in the initial stages of it, I'd be like, I don't think you've got enough to I don't think there's enough to even go ahead with a trial. You know what I mean? I really don't. This is all the quote unquote medical evidence. It's just lies. Just not true. What was the prosecution's purported motive? She's psycho. Basically, yes. And they went with the same one that they give every, nurse or doctor that kills nurse specifically, that kills their patients, like Beverly Allard, who was another one in the UK that actually fucking did it. Basically that she wanted to be the hero, and that like she wanted to make conditions, bad for the baby, so that then she could, come in at the end of the day and save the day. But that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? They all died. You know what I mean? Like there was never a case where she saved the baby's life. You know what I mean? So this suggestion is just complete bull. I don't understand it. And then they also tried to say, oh, she was getting on in life. She's a spinster. She isn't married. Maybe she was jealous of women who were married and having babies, and that's how she. No, that isn't the case at all. You know what I mean? She had relationships with guys, and apparently, according to her friends, that she said she wasn't ready for kids yet. So like that just completely contradicts, everything. It really is shocking to me that you can get 15 life sentences on just suggestion alone, because that's what it is. It was at the suggestion, without any kind of these executives at the hospital, that she'd done it. You know what I mean? The initial suspicion was so many deaths on that ward, and because obviously, it's understandable she was running that ward or heading that ward, not really running it, but heading it. She came under suspicion because of the numbers. But what those people, the outside professionals investigating her initially didn't know was about the bacteria, and she didn't know about the bacteria either. But these three executives who are now on charges of manslaughter, perverting the course of justice, they knew about it. You know, um, the sprint spineless jealousy angle. What a brilliant motive. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's like I'm jealous of you. I'm gonna go and do that. Like if she really wanted one, she could have adopted, and she could have had one. It's not like she couldn't have kids. You know what I mean? And it doesn't add up either, because she'd said to all of her friends, "Look, I don't want kids yet. You know what I mean? I want to wait a little longer. You know what I mean? Until I'm in a relationship with a partner, well, obviously with a man that she could see herself having kids with. It's they were really grasping at straws, and I think the jury bought it, because I think that they so much was kept out. You know what I mean? At face value, yeah, I can get why people bought it, because her defense did such a terrible job, and that they didn't bring in a decent expert of their own to discredit or debunk what was being said about her. That only happened afterwards, when she actually got a decent legal team who managed to get together independent professionals to actually go by point, like I've just done, taking apart all this quote unquote medical evidence against her. It's crazy, and I think her lawyers from the first trial, or her lawyer from the first trial, should be disbarred, because of what a terrible job they did. Seriously, I don't think she was like, grounds for appeal. You know what I mean? Are a lot of new facts coming out that weren't allowed out at the time, and obviously the arrest of these three executives, which is great grounds for appeal, and the testimonies of these independent neonatal and medical professionals, I all put it in Lucy's in Lucy's favor, that like her review of her case could come through, and she could get a retrial, or she could simply just be acquitted by a judge. Like, a judge could examine the evidence and disagree with the verdict, and there's a chance, and say, on the grounds of certain evidence wasn't allowed in at the time, I'm going to quash this conviction, and there not even be a retrial. So hopefully she doesn't have to go for a retrial. Her conviction can be quashed, and hopefully quashed by an appeals judge in the Crown Courts, in the High Courts, in probably London, probably at the Old Bailey, somewhere like that. A big court, and it would be a big deal, and hopefully that goes through for her, and she can get out, and the three executives can be convicted and go to fucking prison, where they belong, for what they did, for the manslaughter, for the negligence, for allowing bacteria to spread on that ward, which resulted in the unusually large number of baby deaths, those three fuckers who set up Lucy Letby, just a woman, a nurse doing her job, because they saw her as an easy target. They have the prestige of, being highly paid hospital executives. And that's what happens in Britain and in a lot of other countries as well. People use their status to make it seem like they are beyond reproach, and they abuse their status all the goddamn time. And that class difference, that power difference between the executives and her, just a neonatal nurse in a department, that was used, and that that power dynamic and discrepancy in the power system there was used by those three to just throw her under the bus. And they don't give a fuck that she's in her cell 23 hours a day, up until them being charged this year, thankfully. They were probably just sitting at home with their families, with their cats, with their parents, with their, like Lucy didn't have kids, but with their kids, you know what I mean? If they have kids, it's not fair, it's not right. And we hope, and I hope, that her case can go through the appeals. She does get granted another review in the appeals process, and then it is granted, because if it isn't, I have absolutely no faith in the British legal system. I've always had little faith in it, but when it's this glaring, it would be really bizarre for them to just let it go. It would set a really dangerous precedent, and I think it would really incense people. People are already, not happy with the way the judicial system in the UK works. And for various reasons, they think that there's a a two-tier system, you know what I mean, and that in many ways that if you're in with the establishment, if you have status in society, you're looked upon more favorably by judges and by the system in generally than if you aren't someone who has a high paying job or yields influence. Because Lucy, had a very important job, but in the eyes of the establishment, being like a hospital exec is a lot more important than being just a nurse. A lot of these hospital execs are like Freemasons, very well connected people. So that sets, that should paint a picture in your mind about what these people are like. Not all of them, of course, but these three that I believe set up Lucy, and they should be charged with. Obviously, they've already been charged with perverting the course of justice, but they should be charged with wasting police time and framing Lucy Letby, and also for that would be actually, yeah, that would just fall under perverting of course the course of justice. Yeah, but I want them charged specifically related to Lucy and her conviction, and I want that, and hopefully, like I've said, we can get justice for Lucy Letby, and I hope she can have her day of freedom, and go home and see her cats again, and see her mother and her father again, and her friends again, and like no one can imagine how that must be like. Even if she is acquitted, completely cleared, and gets to go home, there's still going to be people who call her a baby killer for the rest of her fucking life, and I can't say how badly like I feel for her enough. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't imagine how that would feel. You are accused of possibly the most heinous thing imaginable, short of like molesting a kid. You know what I mean? And then like you didn't do it. You were, you went through prison jail time knowing you didn't do it. You didn't lose your spirit, but still, despite you being vindicated, people are still calling you that. You know what I mean? It must just probably would just be another gut punch. But to be honest with you, I think Lucy's a very tough lady. If she's survived Durham, where she's at for so long, Low Newton, then she is a tough lady. You know what I mean? She's mentally very tough, and I think she should be proud of herself for the fact that she's been able to keep it together, and not try to end it, which I think a lot of people might. They just give up. If you're in there for something you didn't do, 15 life fucking sentences. It doesn't seem like you're gonna get out. You know what I mean? It's seems like you know better than just delaying the inevitable. You know what I mean? If you're in there for 15 life sentences, you're gonna die there. So why not just go out? You know what I mean? Like, that's why a lot of people do that. And even if she probably can't get another job as an earth, even if exonerated. Yeah, and I did say like I hope she's able to get back again, but still like the suspicion would be there, and also I think that like the medical council is pissed off at her and pissed off at the fact that this has been exposed, because they look after their own. We saw it with Harold Shipman, and we're seeing it in this case. They don't give a fuck about nurses or low ranking doctors. They give a fuck about senior doctors and uh, people who are like executives who run the hospitals. That's who they care about. And they're annoyed at Lucy and especially if she gets acquitted, for the fact that she would have shown these people up, you know what I mean, for corruption, and also the fact that the medical council didn't back her in any fucking way, despite the fact that, you know, the evidence, the lack of medical evidence, and the false suggestions that were put forward by a heavily scrutinized, quote unquote, medical professional who was under suspicion of harming his own patients. You know, it's farcical, but sadly true. She probably would be blacklisted as a result of that. But I hope maybe she could get work in veterinary care or something like that, because it seems similar, you know what I mean. And she is an animal lover, so maybe that could be a career for her. But yeah, like I said, if she gets out, she should sue those three hospital execs who will have a lot of money, because it's a fucking really high paying gig, that, running a hospital. Even in the UK, it's a high paying gig. So yeah, she should sue them for all they're fucking worth, for having her, for setting her up and having her locked up in the UK's harshest women's prison, and probably one of the harshest prisons in the UK generally, and being kept up 23 hours a day. You know what I mean? Only getting out for an hour's exercise and wash. It's just, not being able to socialise with other prisoners, even, because for fear of her safety, because of what she's, been accused of falsely. You know what I mean? I can't imagine that all the years she's been in there, over half a decade at this point, barely speaking to anybody but like occasional visitors and the screws, which screws is a slang term that is used in the UK and Ireland for prison wardens, prison staff. You know what I mean? We call them the screws. So yes, it's only like screws she's talking to, and her family, and her mother and her dad and her friends when they come and visit her. But like most of the time, she's just in silence on her own. And the fact she's been able to keep it together, like I've said, it shows you how strong she is, you know what I mean? And it's really messed up. And I've always said this, like, if it can happen to somebody like her, who has no criminal background or criminal record of any kind, who came from a really like respected middle class white family, in Middle England. It can happen to anybody anywhere. You know what I mean? It's like for those of us who've um, had scrapes with the law in our past, even minor ones. We're automatically vulnerable, even to being accused of further crimes, because they go, oh, you've already done something, no matter how minor it is, that counts against you, whatever. But she never even had a bloody parking ticket. She'd never even done anything wrong, so it's like it can be that unprecedented, where one second you're a well-respected nurse with a loving family, and friends and everything, and your cats, and a house of your own in Chester, which, owning a house of your own in Chester isn't, it's Chester, it's got some nice areas, it's got some bad areas, but for her to have been able to buy her own house, and not like mortgage it or anything like that's pretty impressive. She was clearly good at the penny pinching and the saving, but it's just yeah, like I said, it's terrifying that these cases, these miscarriages of justice, can happen so frequently and so blatantly, and like that. It's good that we have these forums where we can, draw a light on this, on miscarriages of justice, on systemic corruption, because in the past, you know what I mean, what before the creation of YouTube, of social media, what forum would you have, or the internet? What forum would you have to say this person has been wrongfully accused? You know what I mean? And like unless you're a lawyer back then, you didn't have the access to all the the legal or the court records or anything like that, or the evidence that was presented. We're in an age, thankfully, where if people are framed or set up or something like that, we can really rally behind them and expose it. But and I think there's a lot of people sitting in prison all over the world right now for serious crimes that they didn't commit. And that's a big thing. I know Kim Kardashian and others have done a lot about that. But I think it's always very important to make sure that the person you're advocating for really didn't do it. You know what I mean? There's absolutely no ambiguity in my view that Lucy Letby didn't commit any of those murders, because there simply isn't any evidence to suggest she did. And to say that her, like her note was cold hard evidence just doesn't do it for me. Sorry, you know what I mean? Like, like I've said, it could be interpreted completely differently. Like she felt guilt that those children had deceased and that she didn't do more, and like she felt like it had happened on her watch, so she was responsible. But like that to me isn't enough to put someone away for 15 life sentences. It just isn't. And like all the, and as we've gone through, all the medical evidence was disputed, so that it heavily disputed and proven wrong. So there is not any hard evidence against her. She shouldn't be doing 15 life sentences. She shouldn't be doing any sentences. She should be a free woman, and she should be at home with her cats and with her family. And hopefully her review and her appeals process goes through, and that she's a free woman. And I won't stop raising awareness of this. I'll keep it going, and I'll keep talking about her case, because I think it's really important. I think like I keep saying, it's if it could happen to Lucy Letby, it can happen to anyone. And we as people have to make sure that like our court system doesn't that protects us, and it doesn't it isn't allowed to be manipulated to attack innocent people and be weaponized by people just because they may have more status or whatever. The world's had enough of it all. Really great you shedding light on the case. Thanks so much, Fall. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you saying that, and I'm really glad I've been able to let like Americans, North Americans know, and people from all over the world know about it, because it is a mainly UK known case. But like it just shows you that like this miscarriages of justice, people can be framed anywhere, and that even in supposedly the most developed countries, there can be miscarriages of justice, and people can be sent away for something that they really didn't do. And we can't have this arrogance about ourselves in the West, like, oh, our system's perfect, our system has no flaws. And sadly, I think a lot of people naively believe that our system is perfect and has like zero flaws, and that no one could ever be falsely accused, and that the government aren't hiding anything, and that things like that. I think in the time that we're living in, where increasingly the public are demanding more accountability and less privilege for people who may have status, and equal accountability for everybody. I think the days of people using their positions of power to wrongfully accuse people, like what happened with Karen Reid. She was accused by law enforcement officers. On paper, they will get more respectability by the legal system than Karen. And it's the same with the hospital execs and Lucy. It's just the same story. And we can't have that anymore. We have to have everybody viewed the same by the legal system and have the same rights in practice as well as theory. And that's really what I think. And a lot of people think that more are waking up. I completely agree. And I think that the pendulum really is shifting, and the world becoming more aware about injustices of all kinds, and more people are becoming passionate and willing to actually get out and do something about it. Because like we saw with the Karen Reid trial, people got out there, boots on the ground. Like Amy Boston, who comes in here, was one of those people who got out there and went to the court dates and everything. So and that's really uplifting and makes me feel great, you know, that there are people in the world who are actually willing to go out and do something for someone else, for their fellow human being who needs help, you know, not for any kind of reward or aggrandizement, just because it's right, you know. And I like that altruism, and the world needs more of it, and it needs less selfishness. But thank you everybody for making it, and I really enjoyed talking about Lucy's case, and hopefully that she'll get her justice and she'll get her freedom. And thank you so much, Val, and I hope we can stay in touch about the possible Mackenzie live, and you may be coming up. But like I said, there's no sweat if you don't feel up to it, or if something comes up. Like I said, I'm not going to Higgins you. I'm not going to spam you with question marks and get all sad. So yeah. But like I said, I would love to have you on. Your analysis is perfect on true crime, especially on that case. And you would make the live a lot better and a lot more professional. So you've got an open invitation. But yeah, thank you everybody who made it and everybody who chatted. Oh yeah, can you address Shuli going after physically disabled people without John? Well, you know, Deb, quick before we go, yeah, Shuli. It's like, my advice to Shuli is just talk about Howard Stern all the time. That's what people know you for. Just talk about Stern all the time. Just tell Howard Stern stories all day with Mike Morse. Be a nostalgia trip channel, because people buy into that. There's people who want to live like it's fucking, you know, 2004, and like Stern's still cool and subversive and making entertaining radio. So yeah, surely if you're listening, just go back, just do that. Become a nostalgia trip. Don't go after people who are physically disabled. You know what I mean? It's a weak man who punches down. Strong men punch up. Remember that. And that's. Thank you, everyone, and glad you like that. And you're more than welcome, Val. Much love to you, and thanks everyone for making it. And I'm glad I gave you a bit of a laugh at the end. So, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Goodbye.